Hey guys, Michael here, co-founder of Studicata, having worked with and helped over 1,000 students prepare for the bar exam. From my experience, what is the absolute best way to memorize black letter law for the bar exam? Well, if you Google this question, you're going to find millions and millions of different responses from neuroscientists to pseudoscientists and everything in between. You're going to find there's dietary supplements, there's this strategy, this technique, this thing and that thing that you can do. Some of those may have merit, some of them may not. I imagine that the results are going to vary a lot between different individuals, but there is one surefire way, there's one idea that I can suggest to you that I know is going to drastically improve your bar exam success rate when it comes to memory for each and every one of you. And that is to memorize less. It is always, no matter who you are, easier to memorize less than it is to memorize more. What do I mean by this? When it comes to black letter law, take any specific rule statement, there's two ways that you can try to memorize it. You can memorize every word of that rule statement verbatim, or you can just memorize the buzzwords that your bar examiner are going to be looking for and focus on your memorization of those words rather than verbatim rule statements. So take negligence, for example. In torts, this is going to be one of the most commonly tested issues every bar exam. So you have two options when it comes to negligence. You can either try to memorize the rule statement verbatim, which would sound something like this. To establish negligence, the plaintiff must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant owed a duty to the plaintiff to conform to a specific standard of care, that the defendant breached that duty, that the breach was the actual and proximate cause of the plaintiff's harm, and that the plaintiff sustained actual damages or loss, right? That's a big chunk of words and sentences to try to memorize. It would take you, even if you have a really good memory, to memorize every word of what I just said in that rule statement would take you at least, 15, 20 minutes if you have a really good memory to memorize that verbatim. Or you could just memorize that rule statement as duty, breach, causation, damages. Those are your four elements, and that you can memorize in a split second. As long as you know how to apply those elements and you know in your head negligence is duty, breach, causation, and damages, then you don't have to memorize that entire rule statement. If you do that for each rule, you're going to drastically improve your efficiency when it comes to memorizing black letter law. So that would be my first suggestion. Number one, don't try to memorize every word of every rule verbatim. You will get destroyed if you try to do that. Again, I've worked with over 1,000 students in bar prep. It's a common mistake I see every year. Never ends well when you go for that strategy. The next piece of advice that I would offer, not only should you try to memorize less when it comes to each individual rule, but you should also try to reduce the entire scope of what you're trying to memorize. What I mean here is, when you sign up for your traditional bar prep course, you're gonna get a stack of textbooks, 24 pounds, we like to say, of paperback textbooks. It's gonna be so much black letter law thrown at you. If you try to memorize every single rule in all of those thousands of pages and hundreds of hours of lecture material, it's impossible. Even if you're only focusing on buzzwords, like I mentioned before, even if you're just duty, breach, causation, damages, it's so many different rules, you're still gonna drown. So you have to find a way to reduce the scope of what you're trying to memorize as well. And the best way to do that is to focus on the most frequently tested rules and the highest yielding rules in each subject. Those, from a statistics standpoint, from a probability standpoint, if you're like me and you like to look at data and numbers, that is your best bet when it comes to memorizing for the bar exam. You want to focus on the rules that are most tested, what you're most likely to see, and the rules that when they are tested are worth the most amount of points. That's from a probability standpoint, the absolute best bet when it comes to memorizing law. If you don't know what the most frequently tested rules are, what the highest yielding rules are, we've done all of that for you at Studicata. I'll put a link below. Over 1,000 hours of research went into that project. Sitting down, reading, researching, analyzing every single bar exam question that's been released over the last 20 years, combing through it with a fine-tooth comb, extrapolating the data, discovering what laws are tested more often than others, putting that all into, an easy to use chart for you guys. Again, that's a massive project and you can download it for free. Shorten your learning curve by over 1,000 hours instantly by doing that. And that's going to give you a great starting point when it comes to hedging your bets and memorizing rules. Because again, if you try to memorize everything, you're just not going to be able to do it. And from a data perspective, that's simply the best way to approach it. But I'll leave you guys to it. When it comes to memorizing black letter law, you can look at different techniques out there, and I'm sure some things have merit, I'm sure some things don't. I do know that your results per individual are gonna vary, but the one thing that I know will work for all of you is to actually memorize less. That's gonna work for everybody. Reducing the amount, reducing the quantity, it's always easier to memorize less than it is to memorize more. With that, I'll leave you guys to it. I wish you all the absolute best in your preparation for the bar exam, and I'll see you at our next video.